Welcome to the Cause Effect 4.0 podcast with me, Selena Lee. Can a large-scale multilingual African language speech corpus finally make AI work in the languages people across the continent actually speak? For years, the promise of AI has been that it would make technology more accessible to everyone, but the reality has been very different. Most voice technologies today work best on a handful of global languages, such as English, Mandarin, Spanish, while thousands of others remain largely invisible to the machines. Nowhere is the gap more visible than in Africa. The continent is home to more than 2,000 languages, yet only a tiny fraction of them are supported by voice-enabled assistants, transcription systems, and speech tools that millions of people rely on every day. For years, researchers and startups across Africa have warned that the lack of language data has effectively locked hundreds of millions of people out of the AI revolution. Tech companies promise progress, but building reliable speech systems for low resource languages has proven difficult, slow, and sometimes controversial. Questions about data ownership, representation, and who ultimately benefits from African language datasets have followed every new initiative. Now, Google says it wants to help close this gap. Its research team has released WAXAL, an open speech dataset covering 27 African languages spoken by more than 100 million people. The project, built with African universities and community organizations, aims to give researchers and developers the raw materials they need to build voice systems that actually understand how people across the continent speak. But questions remain. Can open datasets like WAXAL truly level the playing field for African AI innovators? Or will global tech companies still dominate the technology built on them? And after years of delay in bringing meaningful language support to the continent, can Google finally deliver speech technologies that reflect Africa's linguistic diversity? To explore this topic, we're joined in the studio today by Perry Nelson, the head of Google Research based out of Accra. Welcome to the podcast, Perry.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you about WAXAL. And by the way, you explained to me that a lot of people, including myself, thought that that it was pronounced WAXAL, but maybe you can clarify and make sure we're all pronouncing it correctly, which is appropriate for the topic. But can you tell us a bit more about the project and what this means to Africa?
Of course, yeah. So WAXAL is a word in Wolof, which is spoken in Senegal by tens of millions of people, which means to speak. My predecessor here at Google Ghana was a researcher named Mustafa Cisse, and he had this vision in 2022 of a massive African language data set that would enable, at the time, things that weren't real yet, right? He thought about multimodal models. He thought about ASR and text-to-speech for African languages. And that's how it started. It was just the two of us working with a handful of academics in Senegal at the Ames University. That's the African Institute of Mathematical Studies. And we wanted to see how can we get a large, high-quality corpus of data in Wolof. So we use crowdsourcing, right? We built a chat app, and what we found was that the community was so eager to be a part of this, right? To contribute to something that could come back and benefit them. So that's how it all started, taking a big possible goal and working with the community and crowdsourcing to get the data that we needed. And then it evolved, right? We thought to ourselves, how do we take this model and make it scalable? And that's how the WAXAL project was born. And it had a few principles. Number one, because it was so community driven and because of the passion we saw from the speakers, from the academic community, it would be open source first. So all of the data in the data sets that we release is actually open source first. It's not owned by Google. And we partnered with universities because these are the very folks who we wanted to advance NLP in African languages. So they collect the data and they have first dibs to use it. So we've worked with University of Ghana, Ames, the university in Senegal that I mentioned, Makerere University, and a couple of independent companies as well. And the other principle was that we wanted high quality data. I'm sure you've heard the mantra, as we build our LLMs bigger and bigger, it's gone from quantity to quality, right? And one of the biggest sort of quality issues in African language data sets was a quick shortcut to get ASR, speech recognition data, was to take some scripts that were written for English or other languages, translate them, and then have someone else read it. And then you end up with a few problems. A, it may be talking about things that lack the context of the speakers. And B, if you were to read something off a piece of paper, it may not sound very natural. You may sound like a newscaster or a podcaster. And so when later it's used for a speech recognition model, it wouldn't be able to pick up how people actually talk. So what we did was we collected thousands of images across various themes, technology. We had pictures of smartphones, pictures of foods, local foods, dances, animals, concepts, and we use these images to elicit speech. So what we have is people speaking naturally with their ums and ahs.
Oh, wow.
Environments with car horns in the background, real speech that matches to the speakers that we believe will lead to speech recognition models that will perform better than those that are collected in other ways. So that was sort of one.
So it's a data set, then a transcription. So it's a recording of them talking about an image, but then it's a transcription of whatever it was that they said.
Exactly. So that was part one, get realistic audio of people talking how they usually talk. Part two was get the highest possible quality transcription. So the amazing thing about working with the university is that there are linguistics departments, right? So for example, in Ghana, the transcribers were students of the linguistics department. I've had to convene calls where folks tried to align on the right way, right, to write certain characters or to write certain things and apostrophes and diacritics. There's actually a very passionate researcher from Nigeria who was kind of telling us about missing diacritics in our Yoruba data set that we're now fixing, right? So super important, because I've learned in Yoruba, missing a diacritic can completely change the meaning of a word, right? So this is super important. High quality speech, realistic speech, high quality transcriptions that respects all of the rules of the language. And that was the original WAXAL speech recognition data that can be used to train the types of models where you speak and it transcribes what you're saying. That could then be plugged into translation or kind of used in different chains of things to build different types of apps.
Right. So tell us again, kind of high level, like how many universities, how many countries kind of are covered?
Yeah. So we worked primarily with those three universities, Ames in Senegal, Makerere in Uganda, and University of Ghana, of course, in Ghana. There is an amazing company called Digital Umuganda. There's going to be a lot of shout outs because, again, this was community work. And they also collected various Ethiopian languages for us. These were our partners. We ended up, I believe, currently we have 19 languages for speech recognition. So that was the sort of genesis of the project. The other half of AI and people speaking is, of course, text to speech, right? You have these lovely models now where you give it a script and it says it out loud in English, etc. This is another gap that we wanted to fill.
Yes.
Yes, very important.
Text to speech. Yeah. I mean, what technologies are out there with text to speech for African languages? It feels like that's a gap that definitely still exists.
It is a gap, right? And if you think about, the kinds of things you could build, think about medical use cases, right? Think about being able to type a diagnosis and have it played out for someone to hear. Think about education. And even just, sort of literacy issues, right? A lot of folks would benefit from hearing things versus typing them out. And even just to go back to the original WAXAL chatbot that I built, it was all voice-based, right? So I would send a voice note with the instructions, telling you to send your voice back. And that's sort of how we built it, because we recognize, right, in a lot of communities, voice is the way things go. So all this to say, text to speech, super important, but trickier than speech recognition. For speech recognition, you want data in a natural environment with all of the noise and ums and ahs. For text to speech, you need studio quality, right? Very quiet, everything perfect. So what does that mean? We had to build some studios, right? So that's exactly what we did in University of Ghana right now. There's an audio lab with microphones, all those kinds of things. And what you want is a few different speakers with really great voices, of course. Like any actor, right? They're compensated and they read out these scripts. So you'll find those in WAXAL as well. We have them for Ghanaian languages, Senegalese languages, and a few others. And again, if you think about the software you can build, the ultimate, right, is to have that voice-to-voice large language model experience where you're fully speaking a language you're comfortable with to Gemini or another model, and it's fully replying back to you with its voice. But even with the disjoint pieces, think about, if you wanted to make a commercial and do a voiceover, just being able to like type it out in different languages and get that voiceover. I think I'm really excited what the community builds with the data set.
That's like such a good point about the studio quality voice needed for text to speech versus for speech to text to work well, you actually need non-studio voices. So two really different data sets. What have been like the biggest challenges in collecting this type of data? The actual logistical challenges.
Yeah. So, luckily for us, the University of Ghana, they're right here in Accra. So I think we got to hear a lot about their operation. And one of the considerations was you can find people in the capital of Ghana that speak different languages, but you because of code mixing, they had to travel, right? So they actually got on buses and traveled out to the parts of the country where the languages were spoken. So we have these amazing pictures of them, out in remote areas, getting different kinds of people to record. And again, the beautiful thing for me, because you kind of touched on ownership and how people react to these kinds of projects, they're pictures of people lining up because they wanted to be a part of it, right? And now they're sort of, immortalized in this data set, and they may be the reason why you can speak in a certain language to a large language model. So yeah, that was sort of one issue. The other one that's challenging, especially as we try to model with the data, is code mixing. You try to get a pure version of the language, right, just so that the model has a good understanding of it. But most multilingual people know, like code mixing, it's just how you speak, right? You rarely stick to the language. So I think it's just an interesting challenge, right? If we really want to think about a future where Africans in their homes talk to their smart devices, talk to their phones, they're going to be code mixing. So I think as researchers work with the data set, build these models, it's going to be something that comes up. And I listen to the recording sometimes, and you hear, the occasional English word in there, and that kind of thing.
You mentioned, obviously the anchor partners were universities, for the reason of, I've also heard about that kind of like data labeling, has been elevated to this more, I guess, academic expert level, right? That's where the valuable data labeling is happening, where you actually need expertise or experts to help with the labeling. So for here, you're talking about the linguistic side. I was wondering if, I guess, from AI in general and the way that this is contributing, is Google looking at this? Was this primarily meant to be like a contribution to the research and kind of the academic, the world of academia versus, to what extent is it also a push by Google to even develop AI infrastructure in Africa themselves, or also support maybe the AI innovation community? Like how, what was the vision? What's the driver behind this?
Yeah. So I think early on when we started making the case for WAXAL, we dug into the numbers, and you may have seen this. People say in Africa there's between 1,000 and 2,000 languages, right? Which is just a staggering number. And I think several of these languages have between 10 and 100 million speakers. So these are not kind of small dialects. These are languages that fully have a lot of users that deserve attention, that need to be served. And I think for Google Research Africa, which I'm a part of, we are part of the research org, advancing AI, pushing the limits. But as I'm sure you know, AI is intertwined with academia, right? The papers come from academia that drive the innovation, and it's sort of beautiful relationship, right? So I think there are many academics that I work with, and from the beginning, it just felt like it was in the DNA of the project that it had to be something that the academic community is a part of. And of course, we are almost all Africans, so it never really felt like it was it could have gone any other way. So for our team and for this corner of Google Research, that was always what we wanted to do. And I think going back to that huge number, it's sort of, this is personal opinion territory, but I don't see how we get to covering those languages without, massive participation, right? And you think about Zindi hackathons and that sort of thing. I think to get us to that vision that we first imagined at the beginning of WAHAL, there are going to need to be a lot of players, a lot of new techniques, different data sets. So that's one part of it. For Google itself, I think there's definitely a commitment to serving more users, to bringing our tools to more people. It just kind of comes down to a question of prioritization, right? And I think we're inching towards it, but for Google Research Africa, for my team, we were betting on the research community, which I found to be extremely vibrant and ready to innovate.
In practical terms, what are you most excited about in terms of like where, I guess, like the downstream things that this could unlock? What commercial products do you think this could lead to in health, agriculture? Yeah, what are you excited about? What do you see as the opportunity?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I would love to see is automatic dubbing of media from our part of the world. I think you often see movies from non-English speaking parts of the world. They gain some eminence because they're very nicely subtitled, right? So one thing I would like to see is taking our media, right? If you can recognize the speech and turn it into text, you could sort of auto-generate translated subtitles, right? So people all over the world could enjoy what I think is some really good media from our part of the world. Of course, this is entertainment, very personal, but this applies to educational material as well. As you know, YouTube has auto dubbing. And often when I'm looking for technical videos or learning something new, I'll be watching a video and I realize like, oh, this was made by a Russian person. But because we have the translate backend and the text to speech for English, right? YouTube is able to automatically translate what they're saying and present it to me back in English, which I think is like a modern miracle, right? And if we can have that, both to take content in our languages and present it in other ways, but also to take content in English and then kind of auto dub it so folks can understand it, I think that would be incredible. In different fields, sort of medicine, agriculture, there's often a barrier, right? There's banks and hospitals with these forms and things to be aware of that are often in a sort of a major language like English or French. You can build tools where it's sort of speech to understanding, where someone speaks in their language and the model translates it to an option, something to select from, right? For different options for a financial operation or for a medical sort of decision, right? I think it can bridge some of those barriers.
Especially like, let's say in like low literacy communities, right? Like speech becomes very important for service delivery.
Exactly.
Yeah, this brings up another point to me, like where this speech to text to speech is, of course, important, but in a way, it's kind of the surface level of what AI is going to be able to do. So, how do you see this in the broader picture of AI, the AI revolution in Africa, and what is the potential for filling the all the rest that has to go around it? Because I mean, you've talked a bit about, we need to look at machine trends. Like if content is in English or maybe even the LLMs themselves, the logic engine is in English, the translation now has to be able to work. Or even logic itself. Like I know that there is some interesting work being done on kind of foundation models in, like, say, Swahili or in actual African languages. So, what are the limitations, I guess, of building this level, and what is the potential? How do you see like Africa developing from here?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and you're absolutely right. Right, we're looking at how to get the speech in, and then how to create speech out. But somewhere in the middle, there's some things that may be missing as well. Just want to call out Translate Gemma. The team has done a really great job of pre-training a Gemma instance to be able to conduct translations in a very large number of languages. So I think that helps and illustrates that piece is maybe farther along than the speech recognition and text to speech. And then the second point you raise is just sort of the what goes into the large language model itself, the pre-training and the instruction tuning. Is a challenge. Most large language models just don't have as much content for our languages as we would like. I think you'll find in the academia that there is some transfer learning, right? The logic is sort of exists outside of language, so sometimes it can apply. But I think one nice thing that has happened here, and of course Google is not the only player here. Others have also gone through this process to improve, to post-train a model to be really good at Swahili. You're going to have to come up with a benchmark set, right, of prompts and what the right response should be. And it's this same process that we've talked about of kind of not just a vendor, like putting together like a quick data set, really thinking through the quality of a data set for training an AI model. And I think that institutions all over Africa are building these skills, right? And as we think about how to get some of this data for Africa, we're going to be going back to these same institutions. So there is a data need to be filled, but I think what's happening right now that is exciting is that there are researchers all over Africa publishing benchmark sets, like creating benchmark sets, understanding what the limitations are of current LLMs and language adherence, cultural understanding. And it's a very difficult thing to do from California, right? It's going to have to be University of Ghana, Makerere University, looking at what is missing. Because again, we've shoved so much into LLMs. We're at a point where quality beats quantity any day, right? So we need to understand, we need to create our own benchmarks of what's a good response in Swahili, in Akan, in Yoruba, and how do we get models to give responses that look like that?
Right. Like it would be very difficult to build these, for these to really originate from a place like Silicon Valley. So I think taking that context, I'm curious how you see realistically how the development of WAHAL and maybe the things that can come from, after this subsequently, how does this realistically shift the power balance in the AI ecosystem?
Yeah, I think again, Wahal is a small piece. Of course, I'm very proud of the team that put it together, but it's sort of a demonstration, right? It's from Google, but the reality is it's from individuals all over Africa who put this together. And I think we are one of many players, just a few that I really admire: Ghana NLP, Masakane, who are thinking about the data that's needed for AI. And I think whatever buzz we've been able to create, I hope will just be inspiration, almost like a sound a bell somewhere that, this is something we can do ourselves. As Google, there are these institutions that we support financially with expertise and in other ways. But yeah, WAHAL is going to enable some things, I hope. I hope to hear of text-to-speech and ASR models. I hope someone's going to take the ASR and annotate a bunch of data and use it for pre-training. There's a lot of things that I hope will happen from it. But what I really want is that sort of flywheel of everybody realizing, if we crowdsource this thing, we could have all the data we need in a couple of years.
Trust and safety has been like a big topic, of course, and we talked a little bit about data ownership, governance, privacy. I'm just curious, what have been kind of your key lessons learned or observations through this process about those topics, about governance and ownership, safety?
Yeah, when you go out and you record people, it's a sensitive area, right? And I think for us, we started the process with legal consultation, and of course with cultural sensitivity. We kind of had consent forms, right, that were fair. We made sure that folks understood the consent forms, those kinds of things. And I think it's, again, right, if your voice is going to be part of a data set, these are things that you can't compromise on. And for ownership, again, for us, it was always going to be owned by everyone. I think it's not something that you want to rush into or wade into without all the considerations. So that's very important. On the other side of things, right, once people do speak, you kind of have to be careful about the things they've said. So there was a review process by our partners just to listen in for, inappropriate or weird stuff, or people who just sort of wanted to just say a bunch of gibberish, right, and not actually record anything. So of course, there's quality control by our partners and by us as well. So we had to throw out a bunch of audios where the person took like 15 seconds to think, and then it's like that's not gonna. So there's a lot of quality control, and of course, like taking things very seriously. We want to make sure that people are not saying things that we don't want in there. So within Google as well, there was a process of reviewing it. And of course, we're on call. If there's ever anything that anyone flags, we would, of course, deal with that. So I think there are several layers of safety. And of course, you need to respect people whenever you take their voice, because I think it's a very personal thing.
What about in the AI, I guess, systems and products that might come from this? I know this isn't what WAHAL is actually doing, but as AI systems, language systems get built, then what are some of the safeguards that you think are going to be important, especially in the African context? I mean, in terms of like, deep fakes or, nefarious uses of these technologies.
Sure. So, I mean, I think without going into too much detail, we have a responsible AI / societal AI team that's kind of always looking over our shoulders to make sure we're not skipping over some of these implications. And I think at an organizational level, it's just part of the process. On a technical level, right, I think everyone who's working in this field does some kind of adversarial testing, right? You want your LLM to not be able to be coerced into doing things that you wouldn't want it to. So this is stuff our technical teams are thinking about all the time, and some of it is context specific, right? To make it not stereotype when in Ghana, it needs to know something about what negative stereotypes are in Ghana, right? So it all kind of comes down to investing specifically in making it well behaved in those regions, and we do make those investments.
So on Zindi, we have our community of thousands of up and coming data scientists and AI engineers who are working in this space, building. What call to action do you have for them? How, what advice / opportunities would you like them to know about and think about?
Yeah, this is a great question. I'm relatively new to AI. I've been at Google for almost 15 years, but mostly just a product person. But I think the last year or so has been really exciting for me. With all of the tools and vibe coding, I feel like I'm much closer to taking a concept, finding an interesting data set, and building something right that's useful. I, for those up and coming in science, especially if you're looking at African languages, you can recognize that if you build an interesting TTS model and you build a cool app, you could be one of the first people to do that, right? This is like a moment where you could build something really cool, chaining existing tools, with a bit of vibe coding, reading a few papers. You could build something
Yeah.
that has huge value in the market or academic value. And that's really exciting. If I had time, if I had more time, and if my daughter went to bed early, that's all I would do. But I can't. So I encourage them all to try some interesting projects and collab on Google Cloud.
Yeah.
This is the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I say the same thing. I mean, I think the market is kind of like wide open in Africa. And, if they even have spent 1 or 2 years in this space, like they are actually first to market. They actually have something that, the majority of the world doesn't have because it's such a fast changing new space. For any young person, even if you're, in university still, you could actually build something that's, you know, first to market and hugely impactful, like you said.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so maybe just get in it, start building.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Well, just a final question is, as we see voice technology developing in Africa and becoming more and more accessible than ever before, what would be your vision for the next, 5 years? Where would you like to see all of this going? What would be your dream?
No, I have a very clear vision because I am someone who spends a lot of time with Gemini. I think it's been transformative. I prep for meetings and paper reviews with Notebook LM. I vibe code. I brainstorm with it. And my vision is to just have folks be able to do this in their own language, right? I want my parents. I want the people in the market. I want everyone to benefit from all of this data, right, that we've put together in these models with billions and billions of parameters. I just want everyone to have the opportunity to use it. I think that it
Yeah.
could help people with their businesses, help people optimize, farmers know what pesticides to use, or people just discover new things or plan their trips, right? I wish everyone could use this in a way that speaks to them.
Well, Perry, thank you so much for these insights. I'm so excited about Wahal. I'm so excited about the work you're doing. I'm excited for Zindi to be working with you guys. So, yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
It was my pleasure. It's really nice talking to you.